Hi, everyone. I am your host, Michael Hingson, or Mike Hingson, either way, as long as you get the Hingson part right. Welcome to another episode of Unstoppable Mindset. Today, we get to talk with a gentleman. He's a former basketball coach. He has written books. He has been and is a motivational speaker. He's very much involved in a variety of things, especially training leaders and coaches and others about grit and a number of things like that we're going to get to. I'm not going to give it away. But anyway, I'd like you all to meet Tommy Brown. Tommy, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to it.
Well, we are as well. It's been coming for a while, and I'm glad you're here. We're going to have a lot of fun, I'm sure. And as I've always said, this is a conversation, so let's converse. Tell us about the early Tommy growing up and all that.
Well, I'm from Southeast Tennessee, a beautiful area in Chattanooga, and had a very nice childhood, and grew up with dyslexia and also had ADHD, but I found success in athletics and loved athletics. Was a huge part of my life, and having dyslexia and ADHD made school difficult for me at times, but it also developed, I think, a lot of grit and resilience and in a sense, and caused me to be who I am today. And so, I'm thankful for some of the struggles I had growing up, but beautiful area, lots of great mother and father, and my sister, who actually just passed away last week. She was 56 years old when she passed, so lost her last week, and that obviously very sad, but great childhood, really great childhood.
Were you diagnosed fairly early on with dyslexia, or did that come later? I've talked to people both dealing with ADHD and dyslexia, well, and also autism, who talk about the fact that they knew they were different, but they never figured it out early, and they weren't diagnosed until like they were in their 30s.
Well, I just didn't think I was very intelligent. My sister I had an IQ that was off the charts, and I just, school wasn't easy. So and I think my parents thought, I'm the athletic one, she's the smart one. And, but I did go to back then it's not as if they had a reading specialist. And so they took me away from the normal class and I went somewhere to work on my reading. Really, the only thing I remember about it is working with model airplanes at the end. That's the only thing I really remember. But that was in third grade when I realized that, and I told my parents, I said, I don't want to go away from regular class. I want to stay in the regular class, and so I knew I was a little different. But as far as being like they do it today, didn't have an IEP or anything like that back then.
Yeah, that did come along later, and sometimes people still have challenges with IEPs because sometimes the schools want to really deal with it and sometimes they don't. So there's still a lot of educating to be done about the whole issue of disabilities in a variety of different ways.
Yeah. No doubt, and my parents, I guess, agreed to it because I didn't have to go to that special place after my third grade year, and I was able to stay in the normal classroom. But again, the struggles, when you don't read well at all, you learn different ways to do your schoolwork. You learn different ways to see the world, and certainly that more than anyone. You develop different strengths, and so I consider it a blessing.
You develop different mechanisms to allow you to get the information. And that's what it's really about so often, is getting information, which oftentimes we don't get to do. I've talked about blind people driving cars, and whenever I ask people what a blind person can't do, excuse me, the number one answer is always driving a car. And when I ask people, well, why can't a blind person drive a car? And the response is, well, they can't see the road. They can't see what's on the road. And my response is, yeah, but what that really is saying is we're not getting the information necessary to drive a car. And the reality is technology has changed, and there has actually been a car developed that a blind person can truly drive, not an autonomous vehicle, but that a blind person could drive. It's not ready for street traffic, city traffic, and all that. But the reality is blind people can drive if they get the right information. And it's the same thing. You deal with getting information and have to figure out other ways to get information.
Right. And it's a strength now. I mean, I don't see the world the way most people see it. I don't approach problems the way most people approach them. I come at them from different directions, and so my viewpoint is it's different, and I think that's a plus. It's a positive.
Well, and that's in part because you make it a positive, you make it a plus, and you don't let that kind of hold you back. Well, you went through school, you went to college?
I did. And I tell people I only got in because I was a good basketball player, and and it was difficult. College was very difficult. And especially, in high school, I tell people I was majoring in plagiarism, but in college I did the work myself, and it was very difficult. And I would typically I'd find the most intelligent person in the class, which was always a female, by the way. And I would get them I would befriend them, and I would work with them and get them to tutor me. And certainly I couldn't take notes and pay attention to. That was part of my deal, part of my special needs there. So I just found the most intelligent person, figured it out, and had them work with me, and got through it, and then went to grad school, and really became a better reader by the time I was in grad school, and enjoyed reading at that point. And so I guess it kind of self-cured to a certain degree, and because now I'm a voracious reader, and I love to read. I still have the ADHD, though, as most people who you'll probably figure that out here in our podcast together, and the listeners will. Anyone who ever has met me knows that. So,
how does it manifest?
I get hyper focused on things, and I also I'll go down. I get distracted, and just things will pop in my head, and I'll just want to talk about those. And you're a preparation person. I can tell that just by working with you on this podcast. You're preparation. Whereas I could go anywhere with conversations. I can go anywhere with. It's just how I am. And what I do with the clinics, when I'm in a clinic, I have to stay on script or on focus. Otherwise, it'll just go off the charts. So otherwise, like right now, I'm making myself focus because I have thousands of questions for you about growing up blind and those type of things. So I have to stop myself in this setting. Whereas if we were just in conversation, I would be throwing you questions like that.
I understand. And the fact of the matter is that, as you said, I do like to prepare. I like to talk about the things that guests want to talk about. And the easiest way for me to know what people want to talk about is to ask, which is, of course, what I did with you. But I also know that conversations, which is what this is truly to be, do go far afield. So they can go in all sorts of different directions. And that's okay too. It makes for a much more fun podcast. So, so I appreciate that. But what did you do after college?
So after college, I became I felt the call to be a college basketball coach in my 8 a.m. accounting class, my freshman year. and the professor was a little bit arrogant, and it was awfully early, and I just like didn't want to do it. I was sitting in class one day, and I just was like, I'm not doing this, and so I cannot. And so I literally got up out of the class, walked out, and went to the registrar and changed my major to education. I was like, I'm going to be a college basketball coach, and it was that decided this is what I'm doing. And so after I graduated, I volunteered at a junior college. Then I was a high school coach for 4 years, and was very fortunate to get a college head coaching job at 26, which is really unheard of in the
Yeah.
college basketball coaching profession. Stayed and then was in it for 20 years, 20 plus years, and I had a lot of successes and some failures, and it was a good time. I enjoyed most of it for sure.
Yeah, there are always challenges, but what are the differences that you found between high school coaching and college coaching?
Well, the main difference is your day to day, and in college you're basically you're coaching, and you don't do much else besides that. You may have another little small job that they have you do, like I taught a class, but mainly it's coaching, it's recruiting, it's preparation. Whereas in high school, just you're coaching part time. Your main salary is from teaching, so it's the day to day. And in high school, you deal a lot more with parents than you do in college. Although in college today, college coaches today are dealing with parents a lot more than they used to. But that's basically the main difference. The coaching part is not that different, but it's just your day to day activities really. And the job's different too. Recruiting is such a major part of college athletics, and it is. I mean, let's be honest, a lot of high schools recruit too, but it is the key to being a good basketball coach is having good players, and in college you can't control that.
Oop, there it goes. What were you teaching when you were doing high school coaching?
I taught everything. I taught because I went to a Christian institution. I had a Bible minor, so I started out teaching Bible, and which was incredibly difficult, and I also taught. I have a business minor, so I taught business classes as well, and taught PE at all grades. It was a full day, and different, a lot of different preps, and certainly a lot of work.
I know for me, when I was getting my teaching credential and doing student teaching, my master teacher was the high school football coach, but he also taught math. And my major was in physics, so math was sort of natural was an option. And one of the courses I taught at the university high school when I was doing student teaching. But I really enjoyed working with Mr. Redmond. He was a very bright guy, and I learned a lot from him as to how to be a teacher as well. And clearly, he knew what he was doing, um, and he was a good football coach. At least all the kids said so.
Football coaches where I live, they don't do any teaching. High school coaches, they basically coach all day, and they make lots of money doing it, but they better win here in the deep South. It's high school football. So there's not many high school coaches where we are that teach math as well. But, coaching and teaching, I mean, that's what coaching is teaching.
Really? Yeah.
And a lot of teaching is
very
coaching.
So.
And, I mean, a lot of motivation in the classroom goes on. So they're certainly, in some ways, they are the same profession for sure.
You're talking about recruiting, especially at the college level and so on. What do you think about all the changes that are going on in the NCAA, where now players can get compensated and things like that didn't used to be the case?
That's I don't know. In one sense, I think there. When you look at college recruiting, most people think of college athletics as football, college football, and men's basketball,
Yeah.
yeah, and maybe women's basketball. And so well, like for example, I was an assistant at Illinois for a year on a women's basketball coach, and in our in the Illinois in these major athletic departments, the only sports that report directly to the athletic director are men's basketball and football because they are the money making $1 billion
Yeah.
uh, industry. So when you look at Olympic sports and those type of things, uh, those are completely different. And the NCAA does a very good job of monitoring and directing and controlling every sport but men's basketball and college football because they're not $1 billion industries. And so it's fascinating. And Michael, we're really the only country in the world that ties academics and athletics together. Uh, maybe a Canada or a couple other places, but for the most part, athletics is separate from academics, and so it causes a lot of problems. But as far as the NIL is concerned, uh, you know, a college football player at the big time level, making a little money, I certainly don't have any problem with that. There just needs to be some control and some regulation and those type of things. And in what I teach mental toughness and confidence. And when I go now to Division I institutions, uh, recruiting solely changed. It's recruiting in the few years. I mean, it's changed in the few years I've been out, even at the lower levels of Division I, where coaches are basically talking to agents now. They're not talking to the player or the parents. It's all agent related, and most of it comes down to money, where people are going to go and to sign. So I, that's a great question, and it's such a deep. There are some positives to it, but there needs to be some regulation. But the main thing I want people to understand is that college football and men's basketball are different at the high major levels. They always have been. I mean, the people have been paying under the table athletes at those levels for years and years. Now it's just above board. Well, there just needs to be some regulation to it, and a commissioner and some rules and those type of things. And the NCAA has no ability right now to have almost any say in men's basketball or college football. It's just too big. There's too much money, and they lose lawsuits every they're losing them all the time. So their control is very limited.
You talked about the fact that now the coaches are dealing, like in men's basketball and football, they're dealing with agents. Is that a problem because they don't get to know upfront the students anymore? And so they may miss nuances that would be better to have because they would interact with the students themselves.
Absolutely. And so, but I mean, it's still the staffs that are doing it well are evaluating, and they're using the resources they have well, and they're still doing the research on the athlete too, and trying to, see how competitive they are, how good a fit they are, what kind of teammate they will be. I mean, so staffs are still doing that. It's just the roulette where someone goes because they just feel called to go somewhere, or they feel like this place fits them academically. That's happening very, very rarely. It's more about the money in football and men's basketball, and sometimes women's basketball too. And there could be some, definitely some female athletes that are the same way in softball. I mean, Texas Tech paid a softball pitcher $1 million. So I mean, but it's the Olympic sports and those that I worry about. And also too, with the realignment issues, when you have USC playing Maryland in all sports. Well, in football, that's a charter plane, and that's a 5-6 hour flight,
Yeah.
which that's no fun. 5 or 6 hour flight. Well, that's a lot different than the volleyball team from USC traveling to Maryland on a charter flight and having to, that'll take an extra day at least. And so the wear and tear of those flights is so concerning to me for college athletes and the money that takes. And so there's a lot of issues there that I think most people don't think about, and the mental health and the well being of the athlete. For example, when you come off these charter planes that the big time levels have. So at Illinois, we had charter planes for women's basketball, which means everywhere we went, we were on a charter plane basically. And there was never a time where I was in bed after midnight because you're literally, I mean, you're just flying there, getting off a bus, going right to the arena, etc. Well, at the smaller levels, you're on buses, and even at the low division one level, and you get back 3, 4 in the morning from these trips, and it is exhausting. And so it's part of the whole college athletics dynamic that people don't see a lot of times. And even when you win a game, when you get home at 3 or 4 and 5 in the morning, you're thinking, "What am I doing? Why?" Yeah. And what does that do to the college athletes' experience when they are traveling that much, and it's that tiring for them to get back at such hours, and the academic piece too. That how are these big time college athletes when they go to 3 or 4 different schools? How are they graduating? What's the cost of the academic cost? What is the losing credits and all those things? I mean, it's a
it's a challenge.
It's a business now, and it's
Yeah.
basically just minor league professional athletics at this point.
Well, for you, you coached for a long time. What did that teach you about leadership?
Everything really. I mean, when you lead a team, you don't of young people, you don't realize the skills that you develop that translate to other things. I mean, it's you're teaching the game, but you're also leading a group of young people through a season, through all kinds of different obstacles, adversities, challenges, and you just learn. You really learn how to lead and connect. And but one of the main lessons I have learned, which is one of the things my new book is on, is that you've got to have empathy for your athletes, and if you don't connect with them, then you're going to struggle. And I think that's a great leadership lesson, that you better have resilience and grit, but you also need empathy for your players. And the only way to have that is to spend time with them and truly care about them. And I think that's one of the great leadership lessons that I've learned throughout my career, that you can apply to every field, every area, every team that there is. And your family is a team. Your wherever you work is a team. You're on all, maybe if you're a person of faith, your church is a team, or I mean, there are so many different teams that we are all a part of. And to be a leader, or even to be a great teammate, you have to have empathy for each other. And that's one of the great things that athletics teaches you. And when you're leading an athletic team, my greatest successes have come when I have had both that grit and the empathy.
Well, you've talked about the concept of flipping the switch between grit and empathy, and what does that mean in practicality?
Well, so for example, I'll tell the quick story of Grundy and Sadie. Is that okay, or do you want me to wait? Okay, no. So one of the ways that I've learned this, so I have a golden doodle, and our golden doodle is a bougie delusional, sweet dog. Her name is Sadie, and she is the sweetest dog in the world. But she's delusional in that she thinks she's really tough. Like she sees something, she barks at it, and she genuinely believes that she can take these huge dogs that are out, and so she's just delusional. And we had, and last week that's part of the story um, that has happened. We had to put him down, but we also rescued a pit bull named Grundy. And when we rescued him, he only had 4 teeth. He was born my son rescued him in Grundy County, which is the reason why his name is Grundy. And so he brings him to the house and asks us to keep him. And my wife didn't want a pit bull because we have a golden doodle, and golden doodles are bougie. They don't shed, they don't smell. And Grundy smelled, he shed, and he only had 4 teeth, like I said. But and he weighed less than 30 pounds when we got him. And when he died, he weighed almost 70. But anyway, Grundy, my wife didn't want him in the house. But Grundy's life changed because Sadie had been barking at this German Shepherd. And she goes up into this German Shepherd's yard one day, starts barking at him, and he gets mad, chases Sadie down into our yard, and is going to kill Sadie, or it's a really bad dog fight. Well, Grundy, who is in the yard, sprints down the hill of our yard and jumps into the German Shepherd, headbutts him, and the German Shepherd runs away. So now, after that point, my wife fell in love with Grundy. He was allowed to go to anywhere he wants in the house, and his whole life changed. He had that grit and resilience, and he lived over a year in the woods. Someone had fed him every now and then, and they said, yeah, he's been in these woods for over a year. So incredible grit, incredible resilience, and incredible toughness. Well, Sadie, even though she doesn't have that toughness, she has incredible empathy. And so, for example, my sister, who was sick, and when we found out her cancer was really bad, Sadie would lay in my lap just to make me feel better. And she can sense, golden doodles, I guess, have this, the way they're bred, have this ability to feel what you feel. My mom, who lives next to us, fell one time, and Sadie wouldn't leave her side. Brandy would have these seizures, and she would, if he was having one and we weren't around, she would literally come and get us. And so just this ability to feel and connect. And so as leaders and really as teammates, we got to have the grit and resilience, but we also have to have this empathy as well. And if we can flip the switch between both of those qualities, I believe then we can have great successes in life. And that's one of the things I'm firmly about. Because in my own life, I know that when I have succeeded, I've had both of those, and I've been able to flip the switch. When I have been unsuccessful and made mistakes, it's because I've lacked one of those two qualities right there. So flipping the switch between both. And Grundy, for example, if he was around a group of people, he would be totally fine with them. However, if he felt I was in danger, he would flip a switch and protect me. And we ended up having to put him down last week. It was so sad. And he was actually he was bitten by a snake. He was we live up in the woods in East Tennessee here, and we took him to the vet. We didn't know what was wrong with him. He couldn't walk, he wouldn't eat, and the vet said, yeah, he's been bitten by a snake, and it's a venomous snake. And they felt, and so he never really recovered from that, and he developed this really bad mouth cancerous tumor very quickly, and it was very, very sad. And so we had to let him down last week. But people ask that, and he didn't have papers, because he was a rescue. But we feel like the vet said he thought he was 8 or 9 years old.
Okay.
And so he lived a good life after his rescue, that's for sure. And when I work with teams, I work with so many teams, and it's the first thing people always remember when I go back and speak to a group the second time. I'll say, "What do you remember from last time?" And they always say the dogs, Grundy,
Yeah.
Grundy, Grundy. And when I posted about his death, oh, people. It had over 50,000 views on Instagram, and people just reaching out. It was heartwarming to me to know that a dog had had that kind of incredible impact and on people's lives.
How do you teach empathy to players when you're a coach? I know there's always the concept, got to have a lot of grit, got to have a lot of resilience and all that, but you emphasize empathy a lot. How do you teach that to players on a team, and how do you involve that in basically teaching that in all that you do, for that matter?
Well, with teams and again, a business is a team, a church is a team, a family is a team. It comes down to getting outside of yourself and realizing it is not about you, and emphasizing that at all points. When you're coaching day to day, that is something you've got to deal with every single day. It's a reminder that you have to teach. This is not about you. So, for example, in basketball, a parent would rather their child score 30 points than win the game many times.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, parents would want both, but it's and so it's a constant reminder. This is not about you. This is about the team, and to get outside yourself. And it's a difficult deal. It's I use what I call go-to words and phrases and sentences, and I call what I do a warrior culture clinic and warrior culture sessions, because it is a war going on in our minds. We all have wars going on in our minds. And I think one of the ways we win that war is with go-to words and go-to sentences. And one of my go-to phrases I say every day is, "It's not about me. It's not about me." So you know how it is. With your job too. We do similar things. The travel is the hardest part. And every time I'm traveling, getting on a plane or whatever, and the travel times aren't great, I'll be like, "It's not about me. It's not about me." And so it's just a little go-to sentences. And so that's one of the ways to teach empathy, is for people to get outside themselves, because it's not about you. And some people are naturally more empathetic than others, obviously. But we can all grow. I believe that. I believe we can be more empathetic towards each other. It's really just thinking of yourself less, not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less.
How does empathy give you in a team environment, let's say in a sports environment, how does empathy give you an advantage?
If you care about your teammates and you see your team as not being about you, then I believe you will also perform better individually, but you will be a better teammate to that person, to the entire team, and you will put the team ahead of yourself, which when a group of individuals puts the team first and they have talent, they have a chance to accomplish great things. And so when someone when you know that your teammates care about you and you care about your team, that's what I call an inspired team.
Mm-hmm.
Teams can be motivated, but inspired teams love each other and they care about each other. And in the end, even if they win a championship, they're still incredibly sad that it's over. Even if they win every game and the championship and they win a championship, they're still sad because the journey is over, if they're truly empathetic towards each other.
Mm-hmm. They'll miss the team camaraderie at least till next year, unless they're graduating or just moving on. But
it won't be the same team too. You will all, I guess there have been instances, but very rarely do you have the same group.
Yeah. Year after year.
At whatever level it is.
Well, but I do believe that you're absolutely right. It isn't about me. It isn't about an individual. it is, and it should be about the team. I guess I learned that by working with so many guide dogs, because it really is about the team. People don't understand that each of us on the team has a job to do. For example, my job is to know where to go and how to get there, and to give the dog step-by-step directions and be confident about it so that the dog has confidence in me. But the dog's job is to make sure that we walk safely, and to make sure that we don't step out in front of a car or fall down the stairs or whatever. And the dog feels better. The dog feels more confident if it believes that I understand and respect its job as much as I'm hoping that it understands and respects my job.
Absolutely, and that's a great teammate. That is a great teammate, and
Yeah.
and you're a great teammate.
Well, and that's the hope, is to always have that kind of environment, because it makes such a difference in the way teams work. And it also creates a whole lot less stress, because you can count on each other.
Absolutely, and there's obstacles towards that. Pat Riley, one of the greatest basketball coaches of all time, calls it the disease of me, where people just focus on themselves, or people are they're looking inward rather than outward. That's a disease in a sense, where they start putting their own glory, their own production over the group's production. That's a disease in a sense.
Yeah. What's the biggest misconception that people have about the whole idea of mental toughness?
Well, mental toughness and mental health are different. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions, is that, well, first of all, sometimes people don't believe you can develop more mental toughness, and I totally disagree with that. I think you can develop mental toughness. And mental health, though, is different. I mean, mental toughness is getting up and being resilient and not quitting and continuing to fight through adversity, and dealing with the unfairness of life, because life is not fair. It's just not fair. No one goes through life unscathed, and your life will not be fair. No one's life is fair. And it's mental toughness is the ability to deal with these obstacles, not quit, and bounce back. Mental health is different. I mean, there's chemical makeups of your brain, and so many athletes, for example, have been taught, be tough, be tough, be tough, get up, get up, get up. And when they have mental health issues, they feel they don't ask for help, because they believe it's being solved. Well, that's different. It is you can have chemical issues going on in your brain and mental health issues, depression, anxiety issues that you need help with. And asking for help is not being solved. And so I do think this generation of young people see that better than possibly our generation did. And so that is one of the key differences, is mental health and mental toughness are different. For example, one of my former players was a really mentally tough guy, one of the toughest players I ever had, incredibly tough. He was a little guard, and he was undersized, but he was a great communicator, incredible grit. Well, he's had all kinds of mental health issues over the last few years, and he certainly is not soft. He's just had some things going on in his life that have caused issues, and he's had trouble dealing with those. So that's number one. Mental health and mental toughness are not the same.
How do you teach teams mental toughness without losing compassion? Because it seems like, the misconception that people have, of course, about mental toughness, and you got to be tough and all that, and you can't do that and show compassion, which doesn't make sense.
It doesn't, and I think you need to be able to flip the switch back and forth between the two, and sometimes very quickly. And so mental toughness, competitiveness is so important in athletics. It is a competition. And now, is winning everything? No, it's not everything, but it is, and it's not necessarily winning the game. It's about competing and doing your absolute best together. And one of the things that teams struggle with is is not being competitive enough, because, and I think there's some societal issues with that, but
Yeah.
when you step on a field or a court, that's when you flip a switch and you act like Grundy. You act like a pit bull. And, there's nothing wrong in soccer for giving it everything you got and going after that 50-50 ball, or in basketball going after a rebound with everything you've got. And or in football, fighting for that extra inch if you're the running back. That's the grit, that's the mental toughness that you need, and the ability to bounce back. However, once that game's over and you're in that handshake line, then okay, now let's have empathy for our competitor. Now let's have empathy for our teammates. Let's shake hands, and I think flipping that switch back and forth. I used to be, Michael, I used to be against the handshake line. I personally have had a couple of incidences in handshake lines that, so I was like, why do we have in professional athletics? Like, they don't have handshake lines. They just, go their separate ways. I am all about the handshake line now. I think the ability to, after a competitive game where both teams have given forth great effort, you have a winner, you have a loser. It's what a great way to flip that switch back off, shake your opponent's hand, and say, and it's hard. It's hard when you lose a close game. It is hard. Maybe the referees weren't very good. Maybe the other team didn't show a lot of class, and you've got to shake that other person's hand on that other team, and control your emotions, and say good job. I think that's a beautiful lesson of life right there, where you flip that switch back off, and have that empathy for that teammate. But once you're competing, it is being a pit bull, and which in life requires, for you to be as successful as you have in some of your stories, that takes incredible resilience and mental toughness. And so, but to have true success, you got to be able to flip it back and forth.
Well, the other part about it is that when you are being mentally tough, or when you're being a Grundy, it's also true that there could be a bigger pit bull than you, or that something can happen that would, as you pointed out, would cause you to lose the game. But I would hope that also with really good teams that understand empathy, that you can say to the rest of your teammates, we did the best that we could do. And we need to be proud of that, because you can't just say it wasn't good enough, because that isn't necessarily the case at all.
The best coaching job I ever did was probably the worst record we ever had. And the worst coaching job I ever did, I was National Coach of the Year. We were 32-2. And I did a terrible coaching job that year. Well, what's the difference there? I had great players that year. We were 32-2, and the other year we didn't. But looking back on it, I'm as proud as that team with the worst record we ever had as much as I can be, because they gave it everything they had. They overachieved, and I wish I'd had the maturity at the time to understand that. And I think a lot of coaches don't have that. They just judge themselves, judge their team based on wins and losses. And that's certainly an complete way to do that. So, I think a team is well coached is when they compete, when they play for each other, when they give it everything they have, and you maximize all, because talent really does matter in competition. It really does. I mean, it's to say it doesn't is it's just not true. And but for it certainly isn't all about winning and losing. And the great coaches are frustrated when their teams don't compete to a standard that they have for their program. And so the winning and losing is not as important as competing to, your best. And, it's that the quote, it's not if you win or lose, it's how you play the game. That it's obviously one of the most famous quotes of all time. The reporter who made that quote in the early 1900s, his point of that was not you shouldn't be competitive. That's not what he was saying. He was saying that it's how you play the game means you play it the right way. You play for your teammates. You compete. You give it everything you have. And then when you're done, you will flip the switch off and you have compassion and you shake your opponent's hand. And so that's what that quote meant, really.
Yeah. And I think that you're absolutely right. And the reporter was absolutely right in putting it that way, because that's what it's really about. Again, it's not about you, it's about the team, which is really so important. So you switched from coaching. Why did you end up leaving coaching?
Well, I was at
athletic coaching anyway.
Yeah, I was at a small Division I school in South Carolina, Presbyterian College, which is the smallest Division I institution in the country. And I had just come from Illinois, which is a Power 4. Which is interesting, Mike. You talk about one of your deals is, you're big on not complaining. Well, at Illinois, we had every resource possible. And I heard so much complaining there. I mean, we were on charter planes. We were eating in the nicest restaurants. Well, then I go to Presbyterian, which is the smallest Division I institution in the country. Beautiful little place. It's in a tiny town and a lot of great people there. And the coach I worked for, I was an assistant, used to always say, figure it out, don't complain. When anyone complained, he would say, figure it out. He refused. He had no energy vampires on his door, and he refused to listen to any complaint. It's really one of the great things he does as a coach. Well, my father dies at the end of in May, and so my mom is left here basically without him. So it was time to get out at that point. I needed to move back to East Tennessee, and I'd gone through a divorce a few years back, and the lady I was dating was in this area too. So everything was drawing me back here. So it was time to give up the coaching profession, because if you're going to be a college coach, you're going to move. I mean, it's just the nature of it. Very few coaches stay in one place. So that was one of the key factors. And people ask me, do I miss it? Do I miss it? And I tell them, I really feel called to do what I do. I mean, I love going and speaking and working with teams. So I love that. I do miss the competitive nature of games, and I miss the handshake line like I was referencing earlier. I miss the feeling of pouring your heart into something and then losing, where you give it everything you got and you feel just so drained, and you've got to somehow muster the energy to shake the other coach's hand and shake your opponent's hand. And so I do miss parts of it, but I certainly feel called to do what I do. And, life isn't fair. And so coming back and is where I needed to be to take care of my mom and where my wife now, where she resides and her boys reside.
So what all exactly do you do today?
So I do warrior culture clinics is what I call them. That's the main thing that I do. And in 2025, I've done around 150 of these, mostly with athletic teams, and mostly with at all levels, and all levels of college athletics with all different sports. I'd worked some with churches and businesses, and I'm doing a little more of that. But my main niche is college athletic teams. But again, teams are teams, and so the principles that make a great softball team are the same principles that make a great business too. The employees getting outside in themselves, bringing energy. I'm huge on body language, Michael. I think body language screams. I think we are constantly communicating like crazy, with tone of voice too. And and you can even sense body language. You've told me that was a fascinating. You can sense people
Yeah.
at times, the body language, that's power. I need to start using that as well in my clinics, that your body language is so powerful, and tell your story too. So but all different athletic teams, and what I do takes about an hour and a half, and it's very interactional with the athletes. It's not just me up there talking. It's the athletes, getting them involved, because in today's world, we all have ADHD because we have those phones we're looking at nonstop, and so you got to move fast. You got to get them going, and so because they're used to constant images and those type things.
Well, how have your own experiences with dyslexia and ADHD influenced your message?
It developed grit and resilience, and just a passion for that. And also too, I have a passion for people with special needs, but we all have our obstacles. We all have different things. And like I said, no one goes through life unscathed. But my struggles, it just developed in me this, I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to quit. And I think that is so important. I define failure as not as making a mistake, not as an obstacle. I define failure as quitting, or I define failure as not learning from your mistakes.
Yeah.
So I really even hate to say I failed at something, because
I'm with you.
Yeah, because it really was a learning experience. And so Kobe Bryant has a great video called Failure Doesn't Exist, and where he talks about this, and losing a basketball game, or a relationship ending, or whatever it is, it's not failure unless you don't learn from that experience. And so I think the fear of failure is so huge in athletics too, and on teams, and with young people in all aspects of life. And I tell them, I'll say, whatever you do or don't do in your life, don't let it be because of fear. The pain of regret is far more than the pain of failure. And again, I like the definition that failure doesn't exist unless you quit. And so many people don't try something, and especially males too, I found, Michael, they are so, this fear. And a lot of times someone with a bad attitude what they really have is a fear of failure. And it's not a bad attitude. It's just this, and they come across as really cool. And I'll tell teams, I'll say, "We'll get you beat." And so, they call each other tryhards. It's this whole idea that trying hard at something is not cool, and that is something I am vehemently against.
Yeah,
the fear of failure is a huge obstacle, and really, on the female side, sometimes it manifests itself in being very shy, the fear to speak up, the fear to step up and lead, the fear to communicate.
One of the things that I hear often and still do is that one of the greatest fears we have is getting up on a stage and speaking publicly. Public speaking, people fear. It's the greatest fear that people have. And I never have understood that, because in my experience, by and large, when you're speaking to an audience, unless you're just a real jerk and you're hated it right from the outset anyway, audiences want you to succeed. They're looking to learn from you. They're looking to get your insights, and they want you to succeed. And I've just never understood how people miss that.
That's never been one of my fears either, Michael. I don't know. I'm with you. And I guess I've just always been, when you have a team, when you're a coach, you're constantly in front of people all the time. And so it just becomes something that's natural. My wife has that fear, and she's really a good speaker too. She could be so good, but trying to get her up in front of a group she just avoids it at all costs. And it's just out of her comfort zone, really. And, I think you and I have developed the comfort of doing it.
Yeah.
But I love those nerves that you get before you speak to a big audience that you get. I love that. I love that feeling of, when you like, can I pull this off? Can I do this? And, so I'll tell you what's difficult, Michael, is if you can speak to a group of middle school or high school boys and you can pull that off, speaking to a group of adults is simple. It's just so easy compared to trying to keep a 14 or 15-year-old male's attention.
Even more fun is speaking to an elementary school. I went to a school to speak in San Francisco years ago, and the teacher said, look, you're not going to be able to hold the interest of these kids. You're only going to be able to hold them for about 10 minutes. So don't be disappointed, but you really aren't going to be able to talk with them very long because they just don't have a long attention span. So I started talking, and 40 minutes later, I finally ended talking to the kids and opened it for questions. Now, why? Because I knew that, among other things, talking about a dog, and I had my guide dog Roselle with me at the time, talking about a dog, talking about stories of the guide dog and all that, we're definitely going to hold these kids' attention. And I did hold the attention of the kids for all 40 minutes, and the teachers never could figure out how I was able to do that.
Yeah. That is impressive because I work mainly with older high school or college athletes, and I'll do some small group, some elementary stuff, and it is hard.
It is.
That is a testament to your ability to speak if you can hold second and third graders.
It was fun.
Melbourne.
This was a K through 6 school, and they were all there in the assembly. It was great. Of course, my favorite story, and I tell this when I ask people to give me questions at the end of a speech. My favorite story is I did that at this school when I said, okay, who has a question? And this third grade boy, of course it was a male, right, gets up and he said, how do blind people have sex?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Now, I'm not an idiot. I never expected that question, but my answer was the same way everybody else does. And if you want to know more, go ask your parents. I'm not an idiot, right?
Yeah.
But it's fun to tell that story.
Oh my goodness. Wow. That is something right there. So
can you share a moment where you think that empathy changed your life? Or at least a time that empathy changed the outcome more than toughness?
Oh, absolutely. I was at Lee University for 11 years as the basketball coach. And our first 7, 8 years, we are incredibly successful. Then the college decides to go Division II. We decided to move up a level, and so we go under probation, and I, in my mind, felt mistreated by the administration. And so I became bitter, and I just got inside my own head so much. And one of my former players was now my assistant coach. And he said to me one day, he goes, you know what the main difference between playing and coaching with you is? So he played for me, and then he was my assistant, so he worked for me. He said, when I played for you, you went out of your way all the time to make sure we were okay. You took us to lunch. You had a great relationship with us off the court. You do not do that now. And I realized I don't have the same empathy for the players. I'd gotten in my own head and focused in my own mind, and that led to my failures at the end of my time there. And I can call that failure because now looking back on it, it was a growing experience. But I just stopped I was inside my head. I was bitter. I call it babysitting the junk inside your head. Now, I'll even say it in some more graphic ways with some different groups, but I was inside my head, babysitting all the stuff, focus just inside there, bitter, and it just crushed the empathy I had for my players.
Yeah.
And I didn't get to know them, and therefore our success was. I mean, we it hurt our team tremendously. So that's it, my friend, and I've learned a very important lesson.
A life lesson.
Yeah.
How can leaders, especially business leaders, apply the same principles that you teach to athletes?
I mean, they're a team. You're the lead. You're leading the team, and people will not follow you. Now, you can intimidate, you can influence, and you can lead out of fear where people are just scared of you, and be relatively successful in some ways. But ultimately, if people don't feel safe, they're not going to follow you and give you everything they have. And so I think that's the same. It's the same in business. It really is. If people don't think you care about them, they're not going to follow you.
Yeah.
They're just not. And now you may be able to scare them into producing
for a while,
but ultimately, the great leaders have been able to flip the switch, but between back and forth. And Nelson Mandela is a great example.
Mm-hmm.
In coaching, Dean Smith and Pat Summitt, Tony Dungy are some of the people that have flipped it back and forth there. So it's a team is a team, and we have to have that empathy for each other. We have to let each other know we care about each other, and we have to forgive each other. No one's perfect, and as one of the things teams struggle with, businesses, athletic teams, is forgiving. No one, the coach or leader, is not going to be perfect, and they have to show that that they make mistakes as well. So,
but the principles are the same. Team is team, and it doesn't matter whether it's sports, whether it's business, or a relationship. Team is team, and it's not about you. It's about the team. It's about the relationship, whatever it is.
I have a great metaphor that I use that, every team has someone like the 5 fingers on the hand, and the index finger is the person on a team that's constantly blaming everyone else. It's never their fault. It's your fault, your fault, your fault. The middle finger is the person on the team that has the bad attitude. The ring finger is the person on the team that doesn't have commitment. They suffer from commitment issues. And the pinky is the person on the team. You're not even sure why they're there. So you look at those 4 fingers, and the pinky, I always say there should never be a pinky on a team. You can always bring energy to a team, even if you don't have the talent on a sports team, or even if you're maybe in a low-level position and you don't feel like you have influence, you can still bring energy to the team. And so then we look at the other 3 fingers, and the thumb is the most important finger. I broke my thumb in high school playing football, and it's like the whole right side of my body was disabilitated. So what does the thumb do? The thumb loves all the fingers, but ultimately the thumb cares about the team and the hand more than it does the individual fingers. And the thumb is willing to confront the middle finger if it needs to. And I think that's a great metaphor for leadership there, and being the team. So now, how do you become a thumb? Well, first of all, you can't be one of the other fingers. You can't fluctuate. You can't bring energy when things are going well for you, and be a vampire when things are not going well for you. So that's one of the things that leaderships, they get outside themselves and lead no matter what.
Yeah. Tell us about the B. Grundy Foundation.
The B. Grundy Foundation is something we started, my wife and I, to raise money to keep the cost down for athletic teams to bring me in to speak. And so we just are raising funds and starting to seek out different types of grants to keep the price down, because a lot of the athletic teams that bring me in, they can't afford it. There's budget cuts everywhere in athletics and in universities, and so I'm passionate about small college athletics too. It's one of the main places that where I've worked, and I want to. If someone wants to bring Tommy Brown in to do a warrior culture clinic, I don't want price to be the main obstacle. And so I want to be able to make it work. And so we started the foundation to help keep the price down for different teams out there. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for being here with us. We've done this for an hour now. It's been wonderful, and I think a lot of great life lessons, and I really appreciate your time and your effort to be here and make all of this happen. So thank you very much for doing it. If people want to reach out to you and maybe have you come in or whatever, how do they do that?
The best way to reach me would just be to email me at bethethumb@yahoo.com. bethethumb@yahoo.com. So that's one of my email addresses, and the easiest one to remember is bethethumb@yahoo.com, and I can get you the information on that. One Heartbeat Warriors is my Instagram and YouTube page, but Be the Thumb and email at Yahoo, bethethumb@yahoo.com would be the best way to reach out to me.
Well, Tommy, I want to thank you again. This has been, I think, absolutely great. And I hope everyone listening and watching feels the same way. I'd love to hear from all of you. Please feel free to email me at michaelhi@accessibe.com. Michael, MICHAELHI @accessibe.com. Wherever you're monitoring our podcast today, please give us a 5-star rating. But even more important than that, please give us a review, hopefully a good review. But we really value your reviews. And I think anyone who's interested in listening to this podcast wants to see the reviews that people have of different episodes. So please give us a review. We value that a great deal. If you know of anyone who you think ought to be a guest, and Tommy, that includes you, I'm always looking for more people who want to come on and tell their own stories. So please introduce us. Always looking for guests. But with all of that, again, I want to thank you for being here today, Tommy Brown. This has been absolutely wonderful. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. I had a wonderful time.
If you're ready to go deeper into the ideas that shape how we see ourselves and others, I have a free gift for you. Head over to michaelhingson.com and download my free ebook, Blinded by Fear. Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep choosing to live with an unstoppable mindset.